On one side, we have our present experience of life with the ego self, through the ego self, with reason as the instrument, reason dependent on the senses, and therefore we experience life in a certain way and we respond in a certain way. But on the other side, there is the discovery of that which is the essence of all things, which is Brahman, the reality, call it by whatever names. So, how is this gap to be bridged? How are we to arrive from this state where we are to Brahman, which is all exceeding, all in the heart of everything? Here again, these are the initial chapters where Sri Aurobindo is just touching a note here and a note there. It is not the symphony will develop in the last 6 chapters. But in this chapter, he gives us a hint about the methods of Vedantic knowledge. How did people arrive at it? What did the sages do? Is there an instrument within us with which we can arrive at this truth? One thing we know that on these surfaces, and if we remain subject to the sense mind, and whatever it is showing to us, then we are imprisoned. We cannot arrive at the deeper truth. If we remain tied to the surfaces, if we believe in the surfaces, if we take the surfaces alone to be real, we cannot arrive at the deeper truth. This is the first fundamental thing. So from there, if our flight has to take off, how do we take off? So we have one instrument which is called reason, which we are in a hurry to drop. So, reason itself allows us to start the process. And what is that process? So, reason, if we see closely, has 2 movements. One where it is completely dependent on the senses. This is one kind of reason, which we today call as evidence. Evidence meaning thereby what we see outwardly. But this is so faulty. For example, in the field of medicine, I often say this, use this as an example, that there is a medicine you give and the person recovers. Now, this is the evidence, but what we have not seen, which senses cannot show us, is the inner state, the faith, the will to live, so many other factors, the physician's state, color of the tablet, placebo effect, all this, the reason senses do not give us the data. So, there is a surface reason which is completely bound to the senses, which it calls as evidence. But there is another movement of the reason, this is called as mixed action. That movement is pure reason, which has 2 methods. One is it looks at the surface, but then it uses this surface data as a springboard to feel something which is behind, which is not seen, and yet which is as if evident. To take number of examples. Take for example, and this is always made one marvel. How do animals find their way? We can't do it with GPS. How do they find their way? How do they navigate? This navigation of birds, of fishes is an amazing thing. Not only that, we take it for granted as a doctor. There is a cut, and there is white blood cells and different, they go there, they arrest. What a consciousness that is working inside. Another, just to give a proportion, we use a medicine as a psychiatrist, we use many medicines. Let's say we use a medicine, lorazepam, Larpos or Ativan, it induces little tranquility and calming medicine, then one can sleep. But the beauty is, this medicine has to work on certain specific receptors. Now, when you do the research, it's okay. You see that this medicine acts on the receptor. You are taking it orally. Look at the blindness of the process. How much? 1 milligram. In a 70 kilogram man. This 1 milligram medicine, look at its adventure, if one could trace the journey. Will go through the stomach, absorbed in the blood, from where it will go through the liver or the kidneys, and then it will ultimately walk through all the different blood vessels to the heart and be pumped and reach that spot bang on. It's a mystery. We really don't know exactly. We know that it does, and it will do its work, and with what a certainty. Now, when we look at this, when we look at the way animals instinctively move, when they preserve their own balance, how they multiply when these species dwindling, like tiger and the deer, how the deer found a way, they started multiplying when there were tigers were preying at predators. And when we observe this, it's a whole world. Plenty of examples I have to share on this. Plants, how they exactly, there is a plant, a tree, I am forgetting now the name, but all plants, this example was fascinating. When it is sending the roots down and it encounters a rocky material, so what does it do? So it waits. It will look as if it is waiting. If you see for some time, it will look like it is doing nothing. But after some time, you will see that the root is beginning to pierce through the rock. Now what happens is that the signals are sent through the rocks to something in the plant, and the plant manufactures a chemical which will dissolve that rock drop by drop, drop by drop. It will start dissolving. After 3 years, it has found its way. What is this engineering? We are the only fellows who have the penchant for getting lost and not finding our way. And yet, there is the all-wise guidance that even when we lose our way, we find our way, because there is a guidance in life. Just to take this little story, that there is a guidance. When you look at surface, you see, this is the other way reason operate. When you look at it, you discover there is something which you can't sense, and yet it is there. It is intangibly tangible. So this is a story which is deeply touching, first-hand story of a father whose child, he was thrown out of the school and he went into drugs and all this. At 40s, he developed cancer, and father came to know. Obviously, he had become like a recluse, and nobody really, because it was very painful to see him. And when he was on the deathbed, he ultimately found his way in some drug rehab home, and father came to know, poor father, he went to visit him with all pain in the heart, And then when he held the hand, the boy says something very interesting. He said, I know you are very unhappy with me, and yes. But I want to tell you only 2 things. What are 2 things? He said, first, when I went out of the school or was sent away from the school, you remember mother had called me? Yes. She told me only 2 things. What were the 2 things? Mother loves you. And whenever you remember, you should know that I am with you. Now this, what she had seen or foreseen, how this child, when he heard this, he said, now I don't need to do anything else. And another story which we all have seen right here, and I have seen number of these instances. There was this lady who used to do parikrama of Golkund, move around, completely disheveled, totally crazy. She had some strange powers also. She could hold hand and see, but totally, we don't know. She was a homeless lady. But somehow, every day, she was taken care of. All that she used to carry, and I believe she came from a good family. I believe she had done, I don't know all these details with her, but I'm told she had done medicine or anatomy or something. She lost her head. And then she used to just carry a big photograph of the mother with her among her treasure. And I used to feel, oh, maa ka photo hai, iska kya halat hai. Lekin, see, somebody would give her foods. She would also take a bath. Later on, somebody gave money and every ways, but she was in that state. So much so that once when she was dying on the pavement, she was having seizures. And I was passing by. And I saw her and I said, this lady. But looks, the way she is having the fits, probably she has been, probably rabies, this thought, because she was trying to water, she was trying, and she was looking at picture of mother, it was like that. And her face was turned and constantly in convulsions. So now what to do? You're not supposed to go near a rabies patient, but now, mother. So then auto rickshaw comes, and then, a couple of us put her in the auto rickshaw. She went, all the post-mortem formality. Then when I'm going there, now normally, some relative, somebody, nobody knows anyone. And as I am going through the road, Bimal Dai had seen me go. So she suddenly said, with a sweet, childlike voice, a very sweet, thin voice, Alok, this lady, you know her? I said, I don't know. We are looking for some relative. I know. Now she was standing at the door, God knows why. She gives me the email address. I sent them an email that this is how it is. So you want to come? Nobody, they disowned her for a long time. Then we requested to Diribda. He was very kind. We said, can she get an ashram funeral? Because she has lived with mother in her hands. He agreed. Ultimately, this lady got an ashram funeral. Now, you see, if you look at this outwardly, we can say chance, coincidence. But deep within, there is a guidance in life. How that guidance operates, this is just one case, but there are plenty. In life it operates. How that operates, we don't know. And this is the beauty of life. So there is this reason which feels, pure reason, which has the sense data. The sense data is about her outer life. But it feels there is something. Now, if you ask me, did you see the mother standing there? No, I didn't. Now, in this particular instance. But everything indicates there is a third aspect of reason, which is its highest possibility. It uses the sense data only as an excuse to see what is inside. So, you are sitting before someone, and if you don't try to judge by appearances, gora hai, kala hai, ucha hai, nicha hai, then after some time one passes behind appearances and some inner truths begin to reveal. So here also it starts with sense. So we see that there are three ways in which reason works. One is completely subjugated to the sense, where we see the outer acts, outer person, and we deduce our or outer events, circumstances, and we deduce our inferences. Second is when we see the outer data, but something is trying to show us. See, I'm there, like Sri Aurobindo in the Alipur jail, feeling that Shri Krishna is there and in his lap he is sitting. That's how he describes. I'm there, but where, we don't know. Third is where the outer appearances, again, Sri Aurobindo, when he looks at the tree is no more the tree, but an excuse to see Vasudeva. How does he see? With his arms spread over. It's the tree, which now the excuse is with its arms spread over. He looks at the sentry, and the sentry is no else but Vasudeva. Just imagine. You see Krishna guarding your jail. You say, jail achhi hai. Like Tulsidas, he saw Ram and Lakshman. Some thieves came to steal and they ran away. Next they came. Whom have you employed? That time there was no Z or Z plus security. But people lived in supreme security. And he said, why? What happened? He said, actually we came to steal and we saw two young Dhanurdhars who were standing. Their tej was such that we ran away. This is a true story, documented. That Lord is guarding their place and they can't imagine that who has this saint-like fellow employed. He thought they are somebody employed. So there is the outer event or the outer image becomes an excuse to look behind. And this is something which India has used to its perfection. That's why we, as somebody today I was hearing something very beautiful, of course, earlier. So you can destroy temple, you can destroy gods, but what all can you destroy? We worship the water, can you destroy? We worship the sun, can you destroy? We worship the earth, can you destroy? We worship the sky, can you destroy? You can't destroy. Because it is that vision of the divine behind everything. True, we have lost that vision like Dumatsena, and yet we can reclaim. Now when reason arrives at this level, then it upgrades itself into intuition. And intuition also has this twofold working. One is when there is intuition, there is reason also. And like any new faculty, reason says, lag raha hai, but nahi, ye kaise ho sakta? How can this be? So, intuition is subordinate to reason. After some time, something in us begins to see, sahi to wahi tha jo chupa hua tha, was prompting me, how did I miss it? Then slowly, there is intuition and reason. So, every intuition must be seen. It formulates itself in the form of a rational understanding. It's not exactly logic as we understand it. But it's like a truth is seen and then logic automatically fills in the missing links. And the third is when intuition stands in its own light and regardless of what is on the surface, it says, doesn't matter. This is true. Yan mansana manute yenahur manomatang tadeva brahmantvam viddhi Nedam yadidam upasate. That which the mind cannot know, but that by which the mind itself is known, know that to be the Brahman and not this that men seek hereafter. So the Vedic rishis had the courage to go through this process. They did not stop at first appearances. They went through, they used their reason to the utmost. Then through a process of expanding their subjective capacities, subjective senses, widening, enlarging, deepening, they started playing with their inner consciousness. Till finally they touched that of which nothing can be said in human speech. So this is what this chapter reveals. It just gives us a hint of the Vedantic rishis, how they arrived at this formula. To make it clear for all of us who are logical animals, that it was not that they suddenly woke up one day and said, oh, there is Brahman. It is not like they have arrived at it systematically, and we too can arrive at it. Of course, later on he gives many paths and doors, but right now, because initial chapters of the Life Divine Part 1, when he's writing, he is basically developing on the Vedantic background. So we see here, this chapter 8, the methods of Vedantic knowledge. The secret self in all beings is not apparent. Kathopanishad, one of the very beautiful Upanishad in the form of a story or a dialogue between Yama and Nachiketa. I am just holding my temptation of getting into that story. It is so fascinating. Because Nachiketa wants to know, tell me the secret of immortality. Okay, that little bit is important. And Yama says, why do you want to know? Gods also don't know it. No, you tell me. After dying, will I live? Or some say something in me will survive, some say not. You are the right person because he is the god of death. Yama. You tell me. So he says, okay. And then he says, well, I'll give you the secret, but why do you want all this? I'll give you a lot of hathi, goda, palace, everything. He says, you keep all that, because why no? You will give today, but tomorrow you will take away. I'll take away, because these are gifts of time. There's a line in Savitri. There is a need within the soul of man. And all is too little that the world can give. Its powers and knowledge are the gifts of time and cannot fill the spirit's sacred thirst. So, Nachiketa to pakka adamant bachcha hai. Nahi, I want only that. So, I don't want this rasgulla without the ras. I want the rasgulla and the ras. So he says, okay, fine. Then he says, you have chosen wisely. Instead of choosing prayas, you have chosen shreyas. Prayas is temporary good. Shreyas is the permanent, the eternal. So this is from the Kathopanishad. Yama is telling Nachiketa, this secret self in all beings is not apparent, but it is seen by means of the supreme reason, the subtle, by those who have the subtle vision. So one is reason and the other is vision. So this is how this process, and I'll just read a few passages. One is he speaks about certain faculties which develop when we begin to go beyond this world, when we are no more lost in this world of appearances. We begin to, idea begins to live in an ideative world. The imagination begins to strive upward. So this is one of the ways. And he speaks about the double action of reason. And, okay, this is everything is beautiful, but we are just making a selection. Page 67, the last paragraph. The complete use, just a little bit before that. To correct the errors of the sense mind by the use of reason is one of the most valuable powers developed by man and the chief cause of his superiority among terrestrial beings. Correct the data of the senses. What you are seeing is not necessarily true. So the reason must learn to wait, and then it will begin to see how true. That's why sometimes people say that time will tell. Because things which are held within begin to emerge. So one of the uses of reason is it goes beyond the sense data And this is what makes us superior. The complete use of pure reason brings us finally from physical to metaphysical knowledge. But the concepts of metaphysical knowledge do not in themselves fully satisfy the demand of our integral being. They are indeed entirely satisfactory to the pure reason itself, because they are the very stuff of its own existence. But our nature sees things through two eyes always. So one is the idealistic eye. Through thought we can conceive of Brahman as the ultimate reality. And some people are very happy with that, metaphysical knowledge. And they write, what is Brahman? They write everything about Brahman. Then you ask them, Bhaiya, थोड़ा अनुभव तो किया होगा? नहीं नहीं, वो सब, that is very difficult to experience Brahman. So you can never know with certainty. That's why one eye is the idealizing reason. It can conceive that there is a greater reality, a vaster reality. Simply looking at the universe and meditating at it. When we look at this galaxy, there used to be a man in our college, FMC, people thought he has lost his mind. It looked like that, and he kept on failing. People used to say, no, he is a little crazy. I still remember some Harak, something named Sardarji. So one day, couple of us dared to go and ask him, what do you do? You sit and you are staring in space. We are all ready. We don't know him. If he gets angry or violent, we'll run away from there. It was night time, and he says, Atte dekh. He told us, look at the stars. We started looking, not knowing what one eye is keeping track of what. He's saying, what do you see? He said, the stars. So, he was saying in Punjabi, they have come just like that. He said, that is true. They have not come just like that. And then he just said another two words. See that, in Punjabi. And then he became quiet. But what a hint! Look at the stars. Can one imagine that all this has come casually? He remained till I cleared MBBS. He was still in the final year. It didn't matter to him. People called him mad, but I think here was a wise man. But because he jumped the stage, he lost his mind in confusion. That's what we read just now, that the knowers do not. And yet Shivata says some people take that leap and they pay the price of losing their bearings on the material world. They take the leap. But in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, it is an integral evolution. So when we look at this world, this universe, can we say that all this is dust which has become stardust? Somehow. Amazing play of light and sounds and colors and riot of every sense. So he says that there is this double eye, two eyes in us. For it views them doubly as idea and as fact, and therefore every concept is incomplete for us and to a part of our nature almost unreal until it becomes an experience. So this is what is important, that while it is all right for the mind to conceive, and it is important because this is the first step in many people, because then we understand, and when we have the experience, sometimes when the experience comes and the reason is not developed, it can also create confusion. So the Vedantic rishis, seers went through that. And then Sri Aurobindo says, they are in their nature beyond the perception of the senses, but seizable by the perception of the reason. Therefore, some other faculty of experience is necessary by which the demand of a nature can be fulfilled, and this can only come since we are dealing with the supraphysical by an extension of psychological experience. So that's why one is the objective, so-called, through the senses we are trying to find the divine. And we are using reason. But reason, something is there, but you miss it. I felt something, I heard a sound, like the anklets of Radha or the flute from a distance. But there is another way, which is about psychological self-extension. This is easier. How does it come? Peace. So when we go, we sit and we experience peace. Now peace is not immediately felt by the senses. It's felt by some immaterial sense. Or we go there and we feel mother's presence. How does one feel it? With which sense? Sense can tell us that, oh, looks like mother's hand just touched here. It can give us the smell of Sri Aurobindo nearby with the lotus fragrance. But the sense of peace, sense of wideness, psychological being. Suddenly one feels wide. One feels strong inside in the face of adversity. One feels fearless. This is one of the definitions of Brahman. Nirbhayo. That's how the great Sikh scripture says. And there in our scripture. Nirbhaya. When you touch that, fear vanishes. Now, it's a psychological experience. You don't know how, why somebody else cannot even understand. But fear vanishes. Nirbhaya. So there are psychological states and they were courageous enough to explore it. And not simply say, no, these are all happening inside. An inner joy which is causeless, unconditional, even in the face of adverse circumstances. A faith that defies defeat. An aspiration which mounts like the burning cone of fire, dissolving every obstacle. Where does all this come from? So it is through extension of our psychological consciousness. So senses, supraphysical senses, reason which goes further beyond the first data, and psychological states which we don't bother at all to understand or give any importance to. Because we have little time to stand and stare. So then he says, in a sense, all experience at its bottom is psychological, at its bottom is subjective. It's so true. Same physical data, one species of animal sees it very differently. All experience. When Rama walks in the Janakanandini, bada sundar bhajan hai, Rama ko dekh karke Janakanandini. How does she respond? She says, oh, he is the one for whom my life has waited. But the demons, they say, my God, he is death incarnate. Not death, time, who has come to destroy us. And the Veer, they say, Veeron ke Veer, Parush. And the sages and saints, they say, now this is the avatar for whom we have waited. And King Janak smiles, he says, see, finally my test was right. And the commoners, they are saying, what a cruel king, what a test he has kept. How can this Sukumar, Sukomal, Ram can ever even lift this? It's described so beautifully. How can even he lift this bow? So all experience, the same Ram they are all experiencing. But the psychological state, ultimately, manas, the sixth sense, mind, it adds something and determines. It gives the final touch. You have the painting, the frame. The mind comes and adds a little bindi and it becomes a tilak. Simply because it has added a little bindi. That's the beauty of the mind, how it adds. And then he says that there is another kind of knowledge which exists in below the surface. And when we explore the deeper depths, we can become aware. And then he gives the example of that is the subliminal self, and that is in hypnosis we can access it. Or in some people it may just be open. And one can catch the thoughts of somebody else. It's not something great. In fact, Swami Vivekananda said, I can teach it in 3 days. But that's not what we are here for. To catch the thought of somebody. How? Because subliminal is not limited by the surface mind. And I have seen 2 healers at least. I have heard of one and seen one who could diagnose like that. One which I have seen, I can say, one was Bidhan Chandra Roy, in whose name there is the award also. He had this uncanny sense of picking up something, an illness like this. One I know, a cardiologist who was sitting, and I was an intern, and one lady walks in. Before she can say anything, he tells me, Ghosh Dada he was, and very fine person. He said, Alok, take the stethoscope, examine her chest. I don't know, she has not said a word. So he said, this is a case of tuberculosis. And before I could put it, he said, why not send her for X-ray. X-ray, it is a case of tuberculosis. So I asked him, how did you know? Within a fraction of a moment, he observed things which normally we would miss. And then I realized that patient was to be seen as a whole and not just as a physical body walking inside. This is art. So there is it in every sphere it applies. When we develop this, subliminal self opens and it tags to what is going on inside and it knows the inner state. Even in an ordinary life, doesn't it happen that when we know each other very well, so we don't have to wait for the other person to tell, and that's what all the partners are expecting, unfortunately, all the time. You don't understand me, you say something. Oh, I have to tell you. Basically, that expectation is not wrong. Only at times one can know, at times one cannot know. But how does one know it? Outwardly, everything looks fine. But yet there is a knowledge, subliminal self. This is still deeper knowledge. They didn't stop with this. And that knowledge comes by identity. Sri Aurobindo will develop all this in a later chapter, so we'll not spend much time on that. But knowledge by identity, if somebody asks us, sir, do you exist? I'll say, fool. He'll say, how do you know you exist? I can't say, I know I am a doctor. How do you know that I exist? I am a body, yes, but I exist. How do I know I exist? Body is changing from childhood till old age. Still I say me. This sense of I comes from a sense of identity. And this knowledge by identity is also shown in other ways. Suddenly we become angry. And we say, I am angry. So when you go to a person and say, I get very angry, and if you ask the person, show me, how do you get angry? It's not like that. But we identify with the vibration of anger and we become anger. So these levels of knowledge, reason completely bound to senses, reason detaching from senses, having the data of senses, seeing something behind, reason using the sense only as an excuse to look at the tree and suddenly it's no more a tree but Vasudev with his arms around, and then superior to reason or the psychological states through which we can come to know, and then the deeper subliminal self, and then finally the knowledge by identity. So these are the ways through which the Vedantic seers came to know the truth of things. And this knowledge by identity is what they called as intuition. Intuition is the first glimpse of knowledge by identity. So this is what Sri Aurobindo reveals to us through these pages. He speaks about hypnosis in which the subliminal mind is released and we can have access to data and possible to extend the senses. All these extension of faculties he speaks about. So page 71. The one means we have left in our mentality is an extension of that form of knowledge by identity which gives us the awareness of our own existence. So this faculty we have to, how can we identify with somebody else? Mother is not recommended identifying through the subliminal, it's risky. But supposing one discovers within oneself the psychic being. Strangely, one can see the psychic being or the psychic essence more commonly in others. One can see the good in others because one has discovered that good in oneself. Then only it is possible. Otherwise, so in next page, intuitional knowledge, 72, intuitional knowledge is that which is common between them, and the foundation of intuitional knowledge is conscious or affective identity between that which knows and that which is known. So intuition is simply like that. It is like a flash. It immediately connects us to that which is inside, because intuition sees these two as not two different, but as one unit in two different modes of experiencing life. So it gives us immediately a contact with the other person. That's why intuitive speech, intuitive understanding, it is the true understanding, because it goes behind. That's why it is said to go beyond the written word and the spoken word, scriptures, sabda brahmati vartate. Why? Because you go behind just the word and their meanings and discover something which is hidden behind through a direct contact and intuition. So, And how intuition is the first teacher, page 74. Intuition gives us, page 74 in the beginning, intuition gives us that idea of something behind and beyond all that. We know and seem to be, which pursues man always in contradiction of his lower reason and all his normal experience and impels him to formulate that formless perception in the more positive ideas of God, immortality, heaven, and the rest by which we strive to express it to the mind. For intuition is as strong as nature herself, from whose very soul it has sprung, and cares nothing for the contradictions of reasons or the denials of experience. So intuition has sprung, it's the soul of nature. That's why in lower creation, in the animal, it takes the form of instinct. We use the word instinct. But it is intuition operating in the animal world and the lower creation. It is intuitive knowledge which is operating. In the atoms it is operating. In human beings, we lose that intuition. We have to recover it very consciously. But we see in children, there is an intuitive knowledge of everything, as I was saying, from a scratch on the hand to everything. There is an intuition which is operating in life all through. But it is not tangible or not felt by us. We don't operate on the basis of intuition because we have lost it, and its place reason has come. And yet in human beings, reflex, it's an intuitive response. Spontaneous shrinking from certain things. All this is a play of intuition which acts from behind. So this intuition we have to reclaim, and then we discover ultimately that I am he and you too are that. So imagine what a nice way of greeting. I am he, you are also that. Such a nice way of meeting and greeting. So, but because man has a reason, so intuition has a tendency in human beings. In animals there is no question asked. Animal is moved by intuition, it does not know intuition, it knows instinct, and each creature is given that much which is necessary for it. But in man, because reason operates, intuition must be confirmed by reason. So that's why we see that the Vedic Rishi is discovered by intuition. And in the Vedanta, there was a need to confirm it by reason. So we had schools of thought. But before these schools of thought came, where reason ultimately became superior, the schools of thought were merely, reason was only used to confirm that intuition in everyday life. But the authority was always the Shruti. If the Vedic seers have said, that is the authority. And reason was used to confirm it in everyday life. So Sri Aurobindo reminds us, like the other day we were saying already, page 75, we see this succession in the Upanishads and the subsequent Indian philosophy. The sages of the Veda and Vedanta relied entirely upon intuition and spiritual experience. Why? Because it was the typal age of pristine purity. They were very lucky not to have mobiles. So, how do they communicate with each other? They went inside, They communicated. How do they know about nature? They communicated with nature. And they discovered so many forces. How did they find herbs? I've often asked this question. They didn't have statistics like today. They didn't have means to analyze this plant, this tree. How did they discover that this herb helps? Which today we are confirming in whatever measure and to whatever degree. And there are some very interesting ones like, this Riserpine and then Vincristine and quite a few drugs today. How did they discover it? How did they find? Because these means were not there. It was a typal age. Reason and its mechanisms had not developed. So they could sense it, and they could sense that this will help. And it helped. That's why grandmother's remedies still work. So this is how this age of intuition was there in the Vedic Rishis. Later on, in the age of Upanishads, reason began to develop. So we had to now rationally see things. So he says, the sages of the Veda and Upanishad relied entirely upon intuition and spiritual experience. It is by an error that scholars sometimes speak of great debates or discussions in the Upanishad. Wherever there is the appearance of a controversy, it is not by discussion, by dialectics, or the use of logical reasoning that it proceeds, but by a comparison of intuitions and experiences in which the less luminous gives place to the more luminous, the narrower, faultier, or less essential to the more comprehensive, more perfect, more essential. The question asked by one sage of another is, what dost thou know? Not what dost thou think, nor to what conclusion has thy reasoning arrived. So we see that, and so many examples. One is the story where all the sages went to Ashupati, the Raja, the actual Ashupati, then. So they went and asked 6 sages, go and they say, we want to know about that fire which none of us knows. He smiles, he says, I know, because those who have renounced the world, they cannot know that fire. That fire is only known when you engage with the world. So there is a kind of knowledge which none of them knows. So he gives them rest in his palace. He is a king. Next day he calls them. Each of them, he asks them, what do you know? So they say what they know. So Ashupati adds something to it and says, this you don't know, this will complete the picture. Very good. Second sage, what do you know? So he also reveals. He says, well, this is what you don't know. You add this, it completes the picture. This is how it used to be. Or we see that Prashnopanishad, where they all go to Rishi Pipalad, 6 of them. And they ask, we have come to know something which you don't know. They are also rishis. And what does Pipalad say? Wait, tell me, and starts debating. No, he says, 1 year you live here, practicing Satya, Brahmacharya. After 1 year I will see. And if you are capable of receiving the knowledge, and if I am capable of answering, then you may put your questions. So just imagine what was the way. So after 1 year, they each ask their question and he answers the Upanishad of the 6 questions. Very interesting. It's very cryptic Upanishad. Very beautiful, but questions are like that. What is that being of 16 parts? Now, normally you start wondering what is it describing, and it describes step by step. So this is how they found this profound truth. But later on, reason came in and took over. It was required. And then what happens? Toward the end, he says, the unity of the first intuitional, this on page 76, toward the end, the unity of the first intuitional knowledge was thus broken up. Now people wanted to have a totally rational, organized system. So that intuitive knowledge was broken up. And what was left in its place? And the ingenuity of the logicians was always able to discover devices, methods of interpretation, standards of varying value, by which inconvenient texts of the scripture could be practically annulled and an entire freedom acquired for their metaphysical speculation. One such, we know what happened with Isha Upanishad. I think the first day we spoke about it. But just to close on a little semi-humorous note, somebody once asked me, which school of Vedanta Sri Aurobindo belongs to? I said he does not belong to the school, he is the school master. So, we want to fit everything into a category. And often I see people have these conceived ideas, preconceived notion. And based on that, they want to understand Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo is a gentleman, so he is taking all these pains to reveal to us step by step. Otherwise, he could have said, बच्चे जिस स्कूल में भी पढ़ रहे हो मैं उसका प्रिंसिपल रह चुका हूँ. Okay, so we'll meet tomorrow. And very fascinating chapter, pure existent. Each chapter is fascinating. Pure existent and conscious force, how this creation has come into being. Okay, namaste. Thank you.